They believed death was just the beginning, but what they did to the dead will chill your soul. The ancient priests of Kemet didn't just bury their dead, they sculpted eternity. What if I told you that corpses from over 3,000 years ago still lie in perfect condition, eyes sealed in linen, secrets locked beneath resin and salt? Welcome to the haunting world of mummification, where death met devotion and decay was denied by ritual. Through the draining of bodily fluids, organ extraction, and the sacred wrapping in cloth, the people of ancient Kemet, modern-day Egypt, pioneered a mummification ritual so astonishing that its results survive to this day. Millennia later, their mummified dead are still intact, so perfectly preserved, they continue to speak volumes about their lost civilization. In this video, we're going to unravel the eerie, sometimes grotesque process behind Egyptian mummification and the strange legacy it's left behind. In its simplest form, a mummy is a preserved human body specifically, one in which soft tissues like skin, muscle, and organs are kept from rotting. Across history, many cultures have used different techniques to preserve the dead, but today, we'll narrow our focus to the spine-tingling, spiritually charged methods of the ancient Kemetics. Before we get into the how, it's worth exploring the why. Why would a society go to such extreme lengths to preserve a corpse? Early Western archaeologists assumed it was to keep the person's image intact, a tribute to their likeness. But the real reason? Much deeper. The ancient Kemetics believed mummification wasn't just physical, it was metaphysical. It was the ultimate rite of passage. They believed the soul, specifically a form of it, known as the Kneaded, a preserved vessel to remain anchored in the mortal world. The body wasn't just a shell, it was a gateway, a home, a spiritual anchor. Without preservation, the Ka could get lost, aimless in the afterlife. So the process had to be done right. And depending on your social rank, it could be either rudimentary or ridiculously elaborate. For the less fortunate peasants, servants, common folk, the method was stripped down. Internal organs were sometimes removed. In other cases, the body was packed with thick resin from native trees to slow decay. Then came the salta blizzard of natron to drain moisture from the flesh. Once dried, the body was wrapped in rough linen and set inside a basic wooden coffin, if the family could afford it at all. For most, even this was out of reach. But for nobles, scholars, or elite figures like High Priestess Serafi or merchant lords of the Delta, the process became a sacred science. It began with the ceremonial cleansing of the corpse, often using blessed water from the river they worshipped, the holy Itari, the Nile. Then came the removal of the brain, the organ deemed most fragile. It was smashed with a bronze spike inserted through the skull. The brain was liquefied by force, then drawn out bit by bit through the nose using hooked tools. It wasn't saved. The Kemetics saw no use for the brain in the afterlife. Instead, it was unceremoniously discarded, useless baggage on the soul's sacred journey. Once the brain was discarded, the real work began deep within the body. Carefully and deliberately, the embalmers would open the abdomen, working with reverence and precision. Every organ had spiritual significance, but none more so than the heart. In ancient Kemetian belief, the heart wasn't just a physical organ, it was the very chamber of the soul, the seat of memory, morality, and judgment. Often, the heart was left inside the body, destined to be weighed in the afterlife against the feather of truth. A divine test that determined whether the soul was worthy of eternal peace or doomed to be devoured by the monstrous goddess Ammit. Meanwhile, other organs, lungs, liver, stomach, and intestines were extracted and placed into sacred containers filled with natron salt. Each of these canopic jars was guarded by a protective deity known as the Sons of Harak, each charged with safeguarding a specific organ for the deceased's journey. These jars weren't just functional, they were symbolic guardians of the body's essence. Natron, a powerful alkaline compound found in the deserts surrounding the Nile, was a key ingredient. It not only preserved the organs by drawing out moisture, but also stopped the internal enzymes from causing further decay. But the salting didn't stop there. Once the torso had been hollowed and packed with natron-filled linen pouches, The entire body was buried under mountains of this desiccating salt. The drying process could take over a month, 35 days or more, leaving the skin leathery, dark, and drawn tight over the bone. The body at this point appeared withered, but unmistakably human. The final stages were where art and devotion truly fused. The corpse had to be made whole again, not just in function but in divine appearance. To restore the form, a resin made from sacred trees was painted across the body, sealing it from further exposure to air and pests. Eyes, sometimes artificial, were inserted. A sculpted likeness of the deceased, a death mask, was attached to the face. This was believed to allow the soul to recognize its own body during the celestial trials ahead. Each finger, each toe, was meticulously wrapped in linen strips. Layer upon layer was added, sometimes embedding tiny amulets, protective talismans, and scrolls of sacred text between the folds. These served as magical shields, warding off evil as the spirit navigated the perils of the underworld. Hundreds of meters of linen cloth were used to cocoon the body. Once wrapped, the mummy was placed into a coffin tailored to their earthly status. For the commoner, this might be a plain wooden box with brief inscriptions promising rebirth. But for someone like High Priest Neferra or the noble scribe Otari, the final resting place was far grander. Their bodies were sealed within multiple nested coffins, each more elaborate than the last, often encased within a colossal stone sarcophagus. These were placed in tombs designed to echo eternity. And the tombs themselves? They were treasure chambers. Alongside the mummy would be everything the soul might need beyond death ceremonial daggers, carved scepters, jars of honey and wine, golden jewelry, miniature boats for river passage, and ornate chests of scrolls. Even animal sacred companions in life were mummified and buried with them. Cats, hawks, ibises, and even crocodiles were considered spiritual guides and protectors. In one famous case, a lion cub was discovered, mummified beside its royal owner. And then came the final Rithi ritual known as the opening of the mouth. It was here that temple priests gathered around the body, holding a ceremonial blade known as a sem stick. One by one, they touched the instrument to the lips, ears, eyes, and limbs of the deceased, symbolically reawakening the senses for the afterlife. It was believed that without this sacred touch, the spirit would remain mute, deaf, blind, and still forever trapped in limbo. With the mouth opened, the soul could speak truth in judgment and begin its epic journey through the stars. With the sacred opening of the mouth complete, the final rites neared their end. The body, now anointed, sealed, and wrapped in layers of linen and magic, was ready to face eternity. Carefully, the priests and family members placed the mummy of Setu Meket, a revered scholar of the temple archives, into his ornately painted sarcophagus. Once nestled within, it was lowered into the stone burial chamber, the tomb doors sealed shut behind him on eternal boundary between the living and the dead. But what filled the tomb went far beyond just objects. Scrolls written in elegant hieratic script recorded Setu, Meket's earthly deedshi's devotion to Ma'at, the balance of truth, his work deciphering ancient prophecies, his kindness to the poor. These personal accounts, inscribed on papyrus and linen, accompanied him to the afterlife, standing as testimony in the divine courtroom of Osiris. These weren't just decorative artifacts, they were cosmic receipts of a life lived with purpose. Today, they also serve as a powerful reminder. Every mummy was once a living, breathing individual. This fact was often ignored, sometimes intentionally, by early European archaeologists and looters who desecrated countless tombs in the name of science, wealth, and wonder. The allure of hidden treasure and ancient magic gave rise to dark legends and even darker actions. Instead of reverence, the dead were reduced to monsters walking corpses wrapped in linen, cursed souls out for revenge. By the early 20th century, the myth of the cursed mummy had captured global imagination, especially after the mysterious death of Lord Carnarvon. Only months after financing the opening of Tutankhamun's tomb, Carnarvon died unexpectedly from a mosquito bite that led to pneumonia. Though doctors gave a clear diagnosis, the world whispered about ancient curses and vengeful spirits. Writers, like Arthur Conan Doyle, who had once penned tales of reanimated mummies, fanned the flames. Public hysteria followed, fueling the belief that disturbing the dead came with supernatural consequences. But far more disturbing than the legends were the true atrocities that followed. During the 17th and 18th centuries, the desecration of mummies reached grotesque levels. Thousands were looted from tombs and gravesome by explorers, others by local robbers selling to European traders. These remains were not studied or honored, they were consumed. Yes, consumed. Mummified bodies were ground into powders and sold by apothecaries as miracle medicine. Physicians believed ingesting the ancient flesh could stop internal bleeding, accelerate wound healing, or even cure menstrual problems. Human remains became commodities, packaged and sold as a macabre cure-all. Even artists joined in the desecration. A popular pigment of the Victorian era known as mummy brown was literally made from the powdered remains of Egyptian corpses, giving canvases an earthy tone that unknowingly immortalized desecration. As demand grew, so did deception. Criminals' bodies recently executed were mummified and passed off as ancient Egyptians. In Victorian England, it became fashionable among the elite to host unwrapping parties, where mummies purchased at auctions were displayed and slowly unwrapped in front of guests, like a grotesque parlor game. The sanctity of the tomb, once guarded by gods, was now reduced to party entertainment. The velvet curtains were drawn back. In the flickering glow of gaslight chandeliers, the guests at Lord Whitmore's estate gathered around the macabre centerpiece, a real Egyptian mummy. With exaggerated fascination, they watched as servants slowly unwrapped the linen-bindings layer after layer, revealing shriveled limbs, a contorted face frozen in death, and amulets tucked between folds like forgotten prayers. These were the infamous mummy unwrapping parties of Victorian Britain, an unholy blend of science, spectacle, and grotesque entertainment. What was once sacred was now stripped and scrutinized. The guests marveled in pseudo-academic awe, as if the violation was justified by curiosity. Fingers, hands 7 feet, were collected like exotic souvenirs. The mummy's identity was lost beneath the laughter and the clink of wine glasses. But while some desecrated, others sought to understand. Even now, thousands of years later, the preservation of these ancient bodies gives us remarkable insight into the lives of those long dead. Today's scientists approach the mummies not with scalpels and force, but with reverence and technology. CT scans and digital imaging allow us to peer inside the wrappings without touching a thread. Like ghostly blueprints, they reveal secrets buried beneath skin and bone. We've discovered that ancient Egypt, for all its grandeur, was not immune to modern problems. Air pollution, tuberculosis, and genetic disorders left their mark on royal and commoner alike. Through DNA analysis and radiology, we've learned how these people lived, suffered, and died. One mummy, more than any other, continues to captivate the world: Tutankhamun, the Boy King. His tomb, untouched for millennia, offered a window into unimaginable wealth and hidden suffering. Analysis of his remains revealed the tragic legacy of royal inbreeding. His parents were siblings, and his own marriage was to his half-sister. Tutankhamun suffered from bone necrosis, a cleft palate, and a compromised immune system. A broken femur, likely the result of an accident, became fatal, his body too weak to heal. He died before his 20th birthday. In a small side chamber of his tomb, 2 tiny mummified girl stillborn daughters were buried beside him. The king, who was crowned too young, never became a father. His dynasty ended in silence and dust. The rituals that preserved these bodies were indeed disturbing. Brains extracted through the nose, internal organs removed and placed in canopic jars, corpses bathed in natron for weeks. But for the Egyptians, this wasn't horror, it was hope. Each painful step was an act of preparation for eternity. The mummy, despite centuries of fear and fascination, is not a monster. It is a person, a soul that once laughed, suffered, dreamed, and was loved. Today, we do not unwrap them, we listen to them. Because every bandage, every scar, every hieroglyph tells a story of a civilization's belief in something bigger than death. And perhaps that is the real magic.